Okay, so you're going to do some practice in preparation for the watercolor drawing that has spontaneous watercolor. You have to include a textural element. So, well, I'm going to do one color at a time. So the first thing you're going to do is divide your paper up so that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, a row for each color. One line, because at the top you're going to just do a dispersion. I'll show you what that is, and I'm going to leave that separation in between so that I don't blend the water together. I'm going to just put water on here. And then I'm going to pick up one of my colors. Doesn't matter what color you start with, you're going to do each color eventually. So I'm starting with the phthalo blue. And the first thing I'm going to do is just get a little bit of color on my brush, and I'm going to test the dispersion. How fast does it travel in the water? So if I put just a dot down, now I'm going to put a little more than a dot on this side and see how far that travels. Next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and just mix a nice slurry of this color. And this is not my phthalo, this is ultramarine. That's okay. So now I'm just going to put ultramarine blue without touching that water. No, I touched it a little bit. Just put color all the way down. Wrong color. At the very bottom, I want my color to be pretty dark. So I'm going to add a little bit more pigment down here, and you'll see why when we get to the bottom. So the first thing that we're going to do at the top for textural element is, this is just salt. This happens to be light salt because I use it for making cat food, but just a little bit of salt on there. Now, the next thing you're going to do is a lift. You can use either a paper towel. This will give you a rougher texture, or you can use a tissue, which will give you a smoother lift. So that's lifting the color after you put it down, and you can create texture with that. The next thing I'm going to do is a water bloom. So I'm just going to take some clear water and just drop it onto there. Now, if you have any isopropyl alcohol, this happens to be 99%, but you could use 70%, which is the standard, and it still works the same. I have a little bit in this dropper, and this also adds texture. The next thing, you don't have to do the alcohol. You can just do the water blooms if you don't have any alcohol. That's fine. The next thing I'm going to do is saran wrap. So just some saran wrap, and I'm going to take a small piece and kind of crinkle it up a little and just put it down on here and leave it. My Water bloom. I'm going to do another water bloom here since I do have some space there. So make sure that wasn't the alcohol. So this is just water, and you'll see how that can create a bloom. Not as strong as the alcohol, but it still creates blooms. So now I'm going to move on to the next color. I think I'm going to have this be my dirty water and this will be my clean water. So now I'm going to go to the phthalo blue. And first I need to put water down. I'm just going to use a different brush to save time. So for the dispersion, I'm just putting down clear water. That travels more than that did. Now I'm just going to put down paint here. This time not going into that. I put a lot of pigment down here because the saran wrap tends to take off some of the pigment. So if you want, that's the wrong color. If you want good color, you want to really have strong pigment wherever you're going to put saran wrap. If you choose to use saran wrap for part of your textural element, you only have to have a little bit of textural element on there somewhere in your drawing. You can use one of these, you can use multiple of these techniques, but you have to use at least one to add some texture to the spontaneous watercolor that you're going to then superimpose your drawing over. So salt, I hope that wasn't too dry. Now water. I did that because I don't remember which one I used for the alcohol. So, I'm doing it, doesn't matter what order you're doing it in, you just want to be able to fit in all of it. So those are the water blooms. Now I'm going to use some alcohol. And do a couple of drops of the alcohol. And now I'm going to do a lift. This time I'm going to use the paper towel so you can see the type of textural element you can get with the paper towel. Lifting, and then the saran wrap. And I like to kind of crumple it up a little and put it down. And you won't remove the salt or the saran wrap until you're totally done and it's all dry, because there won't really be much of a texture if you take it off before it's dry. So now that brush has too much blue paint on it, so here I'm going to pour some of that out. So get rid of that green. So first one. Some salt on there. Dispersion, you can see how far that moved. So water. It's a little blue, but it will still work. We'll see how far this travels. A little bit more on this side. And again, I'm going to make sure I have a generous amount of pigment here at the bottom where I'm going to use the saran wrap. So make sure that's wet enough at the top. Some salt. Not all colors react, so you're kind of finding out which colors will do what best. This is the water bloom. And the alcohol. This is much more mild than the blues. And lifting back to the tissue. And this is a staining color. It doesn't lift a lot. And now the saran wrap on here. You could also use something like string, but you would have to sort of experiment with that on your own. I'm not going to do that in this demo. So, clean my brush. Go to the Indian yellow. Again, I need water for the dispersion. Dispersion is just how far will the color disperse. Now, clean water. You have to have a generous amount of color on your brush so that you don't end up with a dry brush. If you start seeing a lot of the white of the paper, you need to get some more water and pigment on your brush so you're not doing a dry brush. These techniques won't work without using a fairly generous amount of water. So because I have lights on in here, this water is drying pretty fast, so I'm going to put a little bit more water on there. The salt. Now I'm going to do I think this is the water blooms. I'm going to do the lifting first. The sooner you lift, probably more will come off, but this yellow is also quite staining. not a lot is coming off. You could still get some subtle value changes by using the lifting technique though. Now water. And the alcohol. And now the saran wrap there. So here's some saran wrap that you can place on there. Next one, got a drop of yellow, so I'm just going to blot it out. And first thing I'm going to do is just put the plain water for the dispersion. Now the permanent red light. And now we're just going to get this pigment onto the paper. That's what I mean by dry brush. So by adding more water to your brush, you can get a better flow. Make sure I have a generous amount of pigment down here where I'm going to put the saran wrap. So, salting. Lifting. That's with the paper towel. More textural. Now blooms. Water. And alcohol. And now saran wrap. That color would be too dirty. I had another clean jar over here. So I'm going to use this for the dispersal. There's some salt on there. I blew it off so that I wouldn't disturb this. So now the quinacridone rose. Also, I wanted to mention that when you have paint in your palette and you finish a project, you can just leave it in there to dry and then reuse it just by re-wetting it. Because a lot of watercolors are sold in dry pans that you re-wet anyways, so you don't have to throw it out. Okay, so if you let it dry too much before you use the salt, you won't get any effect from it. Some paints just do not give you an effect anyways. And this one, I think I might have used it when it was too wet. Maybe not. So now I'm going to put it on here. Salt. Lifting. This is a tissue. And this lifts more than the yellows or the permanent red. Now I'm going to use, this is the water. I'm going to do the alcohol first this time. And then water. And now I'm going to use some more saran wrap. Kind of crinkle it up a little and put it down. And now I'm going to leave this overnight and come back to it and add it to the assignment, the photograph of this, because this has to sit and really dry before I pull off the salt or pull these off. So that's the end for this video.